I'm speaking in reference to Charlie Kirk, the American who have been recently assassinated. And one of his statements is that Charlie Kirk stated that it's okay to have some gun deaths yearly in order to maintain our Second Amendment rights. So it's okay to have some gun violence death yearly in order to maintain the Second Amendment's right. So in other words, he is legalizing gun deaths. It's okay if people get shot and killed, because that is their amendment, the Second Amendment rights. So he is propagating that gun violence, because once he uses his statement and say it is okay to have some gun deaths yearly in order to accommodate the Second Amendment rights, he's simply saying that it's okay to murder people by the guns. That's what he's saying. Now, he also said we must be prepared to change a tyrannical government by guns. He said we must be prepared to change a tyrannical government by guns. In other words, he is propagating evolution by violence through guns. That is what the guy is saying. There is no mistake about it. Now, the question is the Trump administration a tyrannical government presently? Didn't Trump try to overthrow the democratically elected government of America in early 2000? Of course he did. Where many people were charged for that. People were killed, police officers were killed. And what Trump did when he became president, he pardoned every one of them. And this is a part of Charlie Kirk doctrine. It is all right. So when Trump followers try to overthrow the government there, this is part of Charlie Kirk doctrine. It is all right to overthrow a tyrannical government. So in other words, any government that you perceive to be a tyrannical government, it is okay to take guns and overthrow them. That is what he's propagating. Now also, he spoke about the founding fathers. Now the founding fathers that Kurt is referring to were mostly white supremacists. He referred to their founding fathers, and their founding fathers were mostly white supremacists. They all encouraged racism and white supremacy. They believed that the white race was a superior race, and this is what Charlie Kirk is promoting. The white race is a superior race. So when he referred to the founding fathers were the one who had the Jim Crow law, were the one who produced racism, the one who kept back black people. They couldn't go to schools and such like. It was against the law to catch a black person with a book reading. You couldn't educate yourself back there. So when Charlie Kirk talk about the founding fathers, this is what he's speaking about. There's a code between his language. And if you are not acquainted with your black history or the atrocities and the murderous act and the genocide that happened in America against black people and minority, you wouldn't understand the secret code that Charlie Kirk had been using. So he could fool you, and he could fool all others young people who don't know their true history of how they treated blacks and minority groups. He also used an analogy he used with vehicular deaths, motor vehicle deaths. He said that analogy that he used with motor vehicle deaths is very dishonest, because motor vehicle deaths are accidents. Gun deaths are murderous acts of violence. So you cannot compare motor vehicular deaths with gun deaths, because motor vehicular deaths are mostly accidents. Gun deaths are mostly murderous, violent acts. So he's very dishonest. You see, there is what you call a coded language that he's using. So people who don't know, who didn't go back to the history to know how they treated black people before, would not understand what he's saying, would not understand the deception that Charlie Kirk has been using. Now, therefore, he's saying to put armed guards. He's saying to put armed guards at every event, including schools, and that will solve the gun violence. So Charlie Kirk is saying, in order to stop the gun violence, or to eliminate the gun violence, you must put armed guards in every event, including schools. But the irony is, wasn't it the event that Charlie Kirk was in, wasn't there armed guards there also? Was there security personnel there also? And he was still killed? And one doesn't even have to be at an event to use gun violence. There are rifles that could use for hundreds of kilometers or meters away. You see? Sophisticated rifles. So the idea is that Charlie Kirk is very dishonest. So for you to understand the deception of Charlie Kirk's statement, you have to go back to your history. Black history. For instance, the Jim Crow law. Do you know what the Jim Crow law consists of? It was to enforce racial segregation and the marginalization of African Americans. The Jim Crow, let me repeat, the Jim Crow law was to enforce racial segregation and marginalization of African Americans. In other words, as long as you are black, you had no rights. You had no privilege, no rights to a job. They could discriminate to you. The whites would have that job before any blacks. They will make sure whites get the job first before any blacks. Only the scrums the blacks could have had. That was the effect of the Jim Crow law. The Jim Crow law also they used separate facilities, such as schools and public transportation. So blacks couldn't enter white school. In public transportation, the blacks had to go at the back of the bus. And if a white man come in and he wanted a seat, a black person had to get up from the seat and give a white person. Whether there was a black pregnant woman, that black pregnant woman had to get up and give that big strong white man a seat. That was the law, the Jim Crow law against African Americans. You see, even voting, African American could not have vote. They couldn't choose the government. They had employment restrictions. And that is the dishonesty of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk, because he knows those history. He know it. He is a scholar. And every scholar is supposed to know the history. So when you speak about giving blacks an opportunity to employment, or you must have a certain percentage of black employed in a company according to law. And when Charlie Kirk said that is discrimination, is because he's a total liar. What that law was supposed to do is to compensate for the way in which black people was treated. Because the white privilege, it put the white thousands of miles ahead of the black. So these laws were supposed to reverse that, to give the black a fighting chance. Affordable houses was only given to white people, not blacks. So in order for you to know the hypocrisy of Charlie Kirk's statement, you have to go back to black history. You have to go back to Junetide. You have to go back by when black had a thriving city, black doctors, black businessmen, black banks thriving, and the white people bomb that whole city, kill out hundreds of black, mash up their business, destroy their business, because they say black people not supposed to prosper more than them. That is the history. Google it. You don't have to go back to no encyclopedia. Everything is at your fingertips on Google. Google black history. Google all those things. And you'll see how even the American Indians, they were obliterated, they were killed. They were slaughtered, pushed off of their own land, and they were the original Americans. Every white man in America, their foreparents were what you call immigrants. They were immigrants. The real original Americans are the American Indians. And that is the history you have to learn. And that is the history we have to teach our children and our grandchildren. If you don't teach your children and grandchildren that, they will be fooled. Even today, there are racialism among whites, how they treated blacks, even in Canada and America. When I was there in the 1980s, before some of you, many of you were even born, there was this Jamaican guy, I think it's Dudley something, who picked up the civil rights movement to fight for black people right there in Canada, for them to have equal rights. And it's because of the civil rights movements in Canada, Canada were able to change their laws to give black minority groups a chance to be employed and to be put on equal footing with whites. So the laws today are not to discriminate. It is to correct the atrocities that the white supremacists have done to the blacks and the minority groups. So this fella, Charlie Kirk, was just trying to flip the script. But he's been called out. That's the reason why many of white people are rejoicing because of his death elimination. Which I don't believe you ought to rejoice because of a man assassination. But they are rejoicing because he is no more there. I'm talking about many white people, young white people. They know that Charlie Kirk was a racist and a white supremacist. And he was putting those subliminal messages, coded messages, racial messages. And it's only if you are familiar with your black history, you will know that what Charlie Kirk was doing, that Charlie Kirk was a downright racist and a white supremacist. But you have to know your black history. You have to go back. You have to go back to see where these things come from. Do you know is this black civil rights leaders, because of their hard work and their blood, sweat and tears, some of them even giving up their life, like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, and they fought for our freedom. The freedom that young black people are enjoying today is because of what our forefathers fought for in blood, sweat, and tears. Do not let that go down the drain. We must be able to celebrate that and to teach our children the true history, what their forefathers went through. So don't let these white supremacists come with their subliminal message or coded messages. And you will think, well, you know, they are right. They are not right. The only how you could say that they are right is if you don't know the real history, how they treated blacks and minority groups.